I've been campaigning since year 1990, mainly against sanction, and then after the occupation. But I really have been out of the political scene for the past 5 years, since 2008. This is the first time I'm speaking publicly in any kind of event. The reason, I don't want to indulge too much, but I'll give you background. I was imprisoned in the year 2011 on violating of the United Nations sanction. This is a trumped up charge. 10,000 people worldwide that did exactly the same thing because we were trying to help the Iraqi people. And yet I was the only person which was imprisoned and charged throughout the world. According to the United Nations Secretary General, there were 10,000 people, and when I phoned him and I told him I was arrested, he just laughed. He said, there isn't really a big prison to put 10,000 people. And yet I was the only person which been charged in the UK. So my idea, since I've been living here since 1956, I truly believe the UK is a true democracy. Now I truly understood we have an illusion of democracy. You don't really have democracy anywhere in the world. Not in America, they pretend to be democratic, but they're far from it. They just do it differently. In the third world, they get rid of their opponent in a much more open way. In here, they do it in a much more settled way by using a trumped-up charge. A charge which has not been, nobody has been imprisoned, nobody has been tried. It's a United Nations violation. It's not even a British law, and yet they managed to do that. Anyway, that's a simple thing. Basically, what I've been doing since trying to find out why Iraq was singled out. What is their essence, why the sanction? For a start, the Iraq-Iran war, I thought, and I still believe, it is the worst war ever happened. It is the mistake which served no interest neither to Iran nor to Iraq. The main beneficiary of that war were the Zionist entity, which was prompted by America and England in getting supply and getting the war. For a start, both countries don't manufacture arms, and yet they sustained one of the longest war in history for 8 years. It simply grinded them down and destroyed the economy. If you looked at, trying to find a common ground, why Iraq was singled out, why the approach, why they are trying to get at Iraq and nobody else. Iraq has the element of nationhood in the same way as Iran, because they have the population, they have natural resources, they have land, and they have water. And this is similarity only exists between Iran and Iraq. And if you eliminate these two countries, virtually you eliminate any kind of viable opponent to the Zionist entity. So they managed to grind them into this war which destroyed them. All right, the war finished. Then they imposed the sanction on Iraq, which has destroyed the entire population. I mean, I worked in OPEC for quite a number of years, and I was the pioneer of developing the North Sea oil in here. I was myself and other 5 engineers, we developed the first concept at that time. So I traveled throughout the Arab world and throughout the Middle East in particular. Iraq has a professional populations, unlike any other nations. And yet, they managed to destroy that. So the war, so the essence of the war, why they wanted to impose the sanction on Iraq, it is not to get rid of Saddam Hussein, because he violated the human rights. If you look at, if they are universal in fighting human rights and trying to get rid of pariah throughout the Arab world, I will go along with them. But unfortunately, they are very selective, because the human rights violated in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, throughout the Gulf states. They are the worst violator of a human right in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And I walked there myself, and I have seen how they've been treating the TCN, which is the third world country. The people actually who build these skyscrapers and the industry in the UAE. And their human right is totally violated with the consent of the British and the American, and particularly all the multinationals. So it's not a question of trying to get rid of established democracy or get rid of Saddam Hussein for that purpose. Their reason is to get rid of the intellectual people who were running Iraq. Iraq, it's the only country, which is Libya, is the second country, who provide the free education and free medical care, despite their own political agenda and trying to be, with regard to Ba'athist or communists, that's a different matter. But they provided the money which they received from the oil, they plow it back into the country, and they provided the most educated population in that region. I mean, before the war, Iraq has the highest PhD per capita in the world. It was free for education from kindergarten up to PhD. Medical care, if they cannot be treated in Iraq, they've been sent abroad and they're paid by the government. This only thing which really happened in Libya and Iraq. And yet they were targeted, this country. So the second, once they realize, which I used to go to Iraq about 6 times a year between 1993 and 2003, I have seen the sanction beginning to lose grip. People managed to find a way around it and trying to overcome the difficulty. So they decided at that time, Iraq has to be finished. And the result of that war, you can see it, quite obviously to anybody now. Apart from the corruption, apart from what really happened into the country, it hasn't really progressed one iota. I mean, I remember my first visit in 1993. I went around the whole Iraq from the south to the north, and I estimate at that time Iraq would require billions of dollars to be able to reconstruct the war damage. To my surprise, they managed to cannibalize whatever they have and to get it working. So they managed to get most of the infrastructure back into normality within 6 months. And the total cost, which I'm sure, because I was involved in it myself, it came into about $10 million, no more. They managed to get back Iraq on its feet. Not 100%, but at least they had electricity, they had telecommunications, the bridge was repaired, and that was only cost for 10 million. And yet you find now, over 16 billions, money which they had when they first occupied Iraq, which belonged to Iraqi people, it has been completely squandered, and Iraq right now is no different than it was before. So they haven't really achieved any kind of well-being or even improvement in the world standard of the Iraqi people in this country. So the money has been squandered, and the main victim is 4.5 million of the educated sector of the Iraqi people. They have been forced to migrate. The Christian community in Basra, which was under the British when they occupied it, they suffered most. And you can see these minorities are suffering now in every single part of the world, particularly in Libya and in Egypt. So the common factor, which I think to me, which I really came into conclusion that history is repeat itself. After the First World War, they managed to carve up the Arab world. The Islamic world was united, and they created, by the Sykes-Picot agreement, to carve up the Arab world into small nations, which unfortunately the people believed in these divisions. I mean, when I first came in on a Newsnight in 1990, and when Iraq occupied Kuwait, and they said, this is a sovereign state, I said, no, Kuwait's not a sovereign state. Kuwait immediately had oil well with the flag on. It has no sovereignty. It was simply somebody came in and drew a line in the sand and said, this is Kuwait, this is UAE, this is Egypt, and people believed in it.
Who was the somebody?
I'm sorry?
Who was the somebody?
The people who had already been appointed, the appointee of these colonial power. They've been put there and they believed in it, so they start hanging to their chair. And then which is exactly what they did. And secondly, if you look what really happened, they create that scenario of division, the Arab world into small states. Now, in 1950, they come up with a different theory. They found, after the rise of Arab nationalism, they thought, this imperialism is not giving them the right benefit in the country. So they created the Gulf state, the Gulf Sheikhdom. which became the Achilles heel to manage to undermine any kind of nationalistic movement to improve the well-being of the Arab world. I mean, one thing you see which most people don't understand, they think the oil is the prime objective. I think any Arab country always would like to, is not good having the oil in the ground if they cannot really sell it and turn it into money so they can benefit the country. But what the American companies and the multi-international are not looking for a fair trade. You know, we're respecting their interest and our interest. They are looking for a complete control, which is exactly what really happened now. You know, the same oil field. I mean, I remember before the war, Majnoon field was one of the largest fields in Iraq, hasn't been proven. The Elf Total were trying to get Iraq to award that field. The Iraq government didn't want to do that. Primarily to entice the American company to come to term. So it's not one of the questions of they want the oil and they want to keep it and just dictate their time to them. It's primarily they wanted to have a fair agreement, you know, where people can benefit in a way and the American companies can benefit in the same way. They didn't do that. So what they embarked on, they're trying to find the Gulf state in order to control the Arab world now, which is exactly what's really happening now. You can see the force which really running all what's really happening in the Arab world is not Egypt, is not Syria. It is after the destruction of Iraq, which was the last obstacle which they had to remove. Whether Saddam was there or Saddam was not there. Whether Iraq was violating human rights or Iraq didn't have any weapons of mass destruction. It's totally irrelevant. They had to remove Iraq in order to subdivide the Arab world now into a smaller, divided countries. You mark my word, 10, 15 years from now, if they succeeded, you will find every single Arab state, namely Egypt, Libya, Syria, Iraq, will be subdivided into a smaller margin. Why? Because that way they'll be able to secure the control, and secondly, to eliminate any kind of a threat to the Zionist entity. Because the Zionist entity, it will be undermined from within. They know 10 years from now, the population of the Palestinian within Palestine, they will exceed the number of the Zionists there. So what are they going to do? A lot of people, once they have a problem, they're going to migrate. So who's going to be there? If Israel disappears, they're going to have somebody from within. And now that's why they are embarking into this kind of Arab Spring. It's not an Arab Spring, it's an Arab disaster. Thank you.